It's commonly said that good sound design in video games is underappreciated, since it usually takes a backseat to graphics and gameplay. It's exceedingly rare for a gaming experience to be elevated through audio alone. Such instances deserve praise and analysis, since they function as touchstones for digital media as a whole, and they often bring widespread change to their platforms, while serving as an inspiration for other creatives going forward. Arguably, even more impressive are the times where a game's sound is able to invent new, unexpected ways to terrify its audience. Konami's Silent Hill 2 somehow manages to fit both the criteria of audio elevating the experience and the criteria of doing so in a new way. With that in mind, we want to explore how Silent Hill 2's sound design enhances the horror experience by subverting traditional audio expectations of the genre. Psychological horror is a tricky genre, considering one must make a viewer scared without doing so directly through something like a jump scare. We'll establish conventions of psychological horror and horror audio here so that we can explain how Silent Hill 2 subverts them later on. Psychological horror, for our purposes, can be loosely defined as any type of horror that plays on fears pertaining to emotions, mentality, or psychology. Essentially, it's a style that specifically scares people through concepts and ideas, typically in a fashion that supports other more direct types of horror such as gore, jump scares, or monster body horror. Psychological horror generally uses mysterious plots, unreliable characters, and bizarre settings to make a viewer struggle to understand what they're perceiving, which creates a lot of tension.
ゾクゾクするというか、不安でしょうがない、わからないと、自分の、周りにいる。
Sound in psychological horror also complements the emphasis on horror of the human psyche. By manipulating one of the most innate human survival senses in unexpected ways, creatives are able to shake an audience to their primal core. Especially in the horror genre, which often creates fear by withholding information from a viewer or player, messing with what little sound is available can be absolutely haunting. This is commonly done by using sudden loud noises after periods of quiet or silence, distorting sounds we are familiar with, or by overwhelming the senses with many different kinds of sound at once.
Psychological horror has to shake human's heart, deeply.
While Silent Hill 2 establishes trends with common horror sound effects, it occasionally fails to follow those trends, surprising the player. Throughout the game, there are so many sounds that just don't match anything you're seeing or hearing. Those tend to be the most terrifying. For example, the first confusing sound that you hear when you start to play the game is a radiostatic noise. It happens for the first time when you approach the first monster, and then continues to happen as you get closer to monsters throughout the game. If you really think about it, the sound makes zero sense, since the monsters aren't actually making that noise, but as you play more, you begin to associate the sound with danger, and the player will start to panic when they hear it. As you progress through the game, the sound effects get slightly weirder and more confusing, such as breathing sounds coming through the walls, and even horses galloping in the distance after finding just a horseshoe item. All of these sounds make us question our own sanity and help us come to the conclusion that James is slowly succumbing to insanity as he wanders through Silent Hill. Perhaps the most powerful element that Silent Hill 2 uses to build its atmosphere is silence. Silent Hill 2 takes the saying less is more to the extreme, shrouding the player in a quiet that scares more than any sound could. Akira Yamaoka, the sound designer for Silent Hill 2, explains.
なんですかね、無音サウンドが聞こえてること自体が、サウンドが鳴ってるってことが演出だけじゃなくて、サウンドが鳴っていないっていう、その前後、例えば前がガーッと鳴ってて、ポンと音が抜けてガッと鳴り出すとか、その鳴っていないっていうこともその。
In many typical horror games, the player would expect to hear some kind of creepy music, screams in the background, or a scary monster in the distance, but throughout much of the gameplay, the player hears practically nothing. This leaves what could be on the horizon to their own imagination, manipulating the player to psych themselves out and create their own fear. Echoes of footsteps and metallic clanks are juxtaposed with long stretches of absolutely nothing. You forget what safety even sounds like. There's no rhythm to pace yourself against.
Ow!
From the very beginning of the game, James is alone in his surroundings.
Hey, wait!
It strongly utilizes contrapuntal sound, which can be defined as a technique of sound production in film where the soundtrack does not directly match the image in a mood or narrative context. Your surroundings should be making some kind of noise, but the player is left with nothing, questioning if they've even gone anywhere. When monsters are found, such as the infamous Pyramid Head, there isn't a sweeping and dramatic score to cue the player to be scared. This gives the monsters a unique aura, with many just standing there menacingly. In a world overstuffed with cheap jump scares and overdone effects, this is a refreshing approach to building tension. It's the stillness that screams in Silent Hill. The game makes powerful use of anempathic sound, which can be defined as when diegetic music exhibits conspicuous indifference to what is going on in the film's plot, creating a sense of the tragic. The lack of any sound or score in critical scenes make them feel tense and stale, making the player question how the game wants them to react. In Angela's death scene, one of the most tragic and dramatic scenes in the game, the player gets nothing to console them. No music. Only the soft crackle of flames. Even when the plot of the game is resolved and the final boss is slain, there is no relief of the silence. No sound but your own footsteps. It gives you space to sit in what you've just done. Killed Maria, remembered Mary, unraveled your guilt. The silence before the ending cutscene is a moment of confrontation with yourself. Next, a lot of the music in Silent Hill 2 establishes a dreamlike atmosphere, unlike the average horror media, which often includes low drones, high-pitched screeches, and sudden outbursts of sound. Although Silent Hill 2 has some implications of these musical effects, the majority of the gameplay utilizes media composed by Akira Yamaoka. Yamaoka emphasizes the importance of straying away from the norm within the horror genre. Within his musical scoring, the use of synthesizers, electric guitars, and drums allow a specific mystical and dreamlike tone to take place. When immersed in the gameplay, Tamaoka's choice of lo-fi hip-hop and industrial music put the player in a state of comfort as they go through the game.
To end.
That's why I did it, honey. I just couldn't watch you suffer.
The sounds layered on top of music create a feeling of displacement for the player, contrasting the calm music with off-putting sound effects. Being immersed in a song, getting to the peak of comfort, and then being struck by a jarring noise increases the intensity of disturbance. Prior to today's recording technologies, sound has been tied to the physical objects or mechanisms in which they came from. The introduction of recording devices allows for the separation of sound from its source, known as schizophonic activity. Collins describes it as the sound resulting from the separation of sound from source. In the ears of Schaefer are unnatural and alien. They are disembodied. This emphasizes the effect that Tamaoka's soundtrack has on the player because they are immersed in the fuzzy atmosphere only to be disrupted by these separated sounds. One of the most unique parts of Silent Hill 2's sound, one which strongly challenges the established norms of entertainment as a whole, is its voice acting.
How can you sit there and eat pizza?
Voice acting is key to helping the player empathize with the protagonist they control. Karen Collins, an associate professor in the Department of Communication Arts at the University of Waterloo, states, "We hear the voices of others by experiencing those voices in terms of our own bodily postures and expressions. And just as we mimic the physical postures and facial expressions of those whom we interact in order to empathize, we likewise mimic voice."
I'm kind of lost.
Lost?
However, Silent Hill's nuance in this department isn't a compliment. What is different about its voice acting is that it sounds horrible. All of the characters speak and react in ways that are completely indifferent or unrelated to what is going on around them. Deliveries are often flat, uninterested, odd, and can change on a dime. While this might be attributed to lazy voice actors, this actually ends up working in the game's favor. When none of the characters react or sound the way the player expects, it makes the game all the harder to relate to and understand. This further drives home how disturbed and detached the game's characters are, so much that the player who controls them can't even understand them. It almost makes the game feel broken and unfinished, which can in turn make it feel dangerous. If the game appears unpolished to the player, they'll begin to worry about what unintended events or glitches can threaten them. While the game doesn't have any game-breaking flaws, this remains a constant threat to first-time players. Playing an old, eerie game with poor graphics and weird voice acting can be much more nerve-wracking than a modern horror game with monsters in high definition.
Killing a person ain't no big deal. Just put the gun to their head, pow!
When all is said and done, it becomes clear that Silent Hill 2's sound design is unique, eerie, and extremely effective at gnawing at a player's psyche. Random and strange sound effects keep the audience on their toes. Bizarre and inappropriate silences terrify us because of the threat of the unknown. Akira Yamaoka's hauntingly beautiful melodies perfectly walk the line between horror and dreams. Finally, the voice acting is strange enough to where no character seems even remotely trustworthy. Each element on their own already has the making of a fascinating horror soundscape. But Silent Hill 2's innovative blend of all of these aspects is certainly part of the reason it has grown to become an all-time classic in its medium.